Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is the always delightful Tracie Harris.
Howdy.
Today is Sunday, October 14th. We are a live call-in public access atheist television show based in Austin, Texas, dedicated to promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We are also available through live streaming video at ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-experience.com. You can provide feedback by commenting on the official show blog at freethoughtblogs.com/axp or email us at tv@atheist-community.org. We are actually getting pretty good about regularly posting those open threads for every show, right?
Well, I didn't post an open thread this week, but I did post one about an Egyptian atheist, and that's actually my topic, so I hope that can count as my
keep as an open thread. If you enjoy this show, you should check out the other great stuff that the ACA does, including the nonprofits and Godless Bitches, which you can find linked from the Atheist Experience website. The cast and crew of the Atheist Experience go to dinner after the show at Threadgill's now, which is on Riverside Drive. And just a bit of exciting news, which is that next weekend the Texas Free Thought Convention will be in town right here in Austin. There's going to be awesome atheists from all over the world. There's going to be, I think, Ellen Johnson and P.Z. Myers. Richard Dawkins is going to give a talk. There's going to be a rally at the Capitol. It's going to be so fun, you guys. And there's going to be, we expect a really crowded episode of the Atheist Experience, and we're working on getting it to another 2-hour show. We're not sure if that's really going to happen. But anyway, how are you today, Tracie?
Doing well, thank you. And
what's up?
Well, I actually have a couple things. First off is what I was talking to you about earlier about signing into Yahoo tonight, and saw an interesting headline about a neurosurgeon who is, I guess, has a book now about his visit to heaven, or he went into a coma, and so now he's touting the afterlife that he knows is real because he dreamed it.
He and Colton Burpo should get together and hang out.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt. I'm sure they all drink from the same water cooler. But we actually, the thing that surprised me about this particular claim of an afterlife was that I recognized the person's name as someone who had written to our email list back in January. And so he had written to us, and I had the pleasure of responding to him and getting the massive dump of pseudoscientific research twisting crazy that ensued. And I, not wanting to, I guess, hoard the fun all to myself on the thread, put it to the blog so that other people could enjoy it. And it just became a complete shred on the blog, where it was just through the looking glass, down the rabbit hole, absolute nuts. And if you've seen the Yahoo News headline today about the Eben Alexander book, and you want to go see even his defense of his claims on our blog, it is posted on a January posting. I think the title was the "I Can't Believe It's Not God" hypothesis.
Oh yeah, I do remember.
So you might check it out.
So devastated by the crushing blow dealt to him by our commenters, he went crawling to Newsweek, who fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
And he's doing a book now. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I believe that's correct. I mean, people were talking about the book. I didn't read too much more. Once I saw who it was, I was just like, oh, I can't even believe this. So apologies if he's not writing a book, if it was just an article, but I thought some commenters had mentioned that he's putting a book out. So anyway, that was sort of a last minute. I didn't know I would even be saying that today. But I also happened to have a conversation with an atheist in Egypt who hit me up on a chat line and was talking to me about an atheist group that he had put together, and I was somewhat surprised by this in light of the arrest of an Egyptian atheist who had posted some things at Facebook, and when a mob showed up at his house, his mother had called the authorities, who came and promptly, rather than protect him from the crazy mob, arrested him, and he's now in prison. And there are some online petitions to try and get him out of custody. But in light of that, it seemed really strange to me that there was a group of atheists in Egypt that were promoting an atheist group, like an open atheist group. And so I asked him how, whether or not they could be open and whether or not there was any, danger in being an open atheist there. And he said, yes, absolutely there is. And they are just simply stepping up because I suppose they feel like they have to. And a lot of them are actually using their real names and photos, and some of them, of course, aren't. I guess it depends kind of like here on your situation, except that it's more of a national restricted thing there. I mean, I don't think it's illegal to be an atheist. I'm not sure. I don't want to say anything about the laws of Egypt. But one of the things that really surprised me a lot was that I recalled from when I was younger that my recollection of Egypt before the Middle East got to be in the news in recent years after 9/11, my recollection of it was that Egypt was a very progressive nation and not like a highly theocratic, weirdly restricted nation. And so I asked him if my memories of it were simply based on ignorance, if it wasn't reported accurately, and he said no, that was in fact true, that in the 1960s it was a very progressive nation. He talked about some other things that were very progressive, and I asked, what happened? What happened there? And the conversation was very interesting. And finally I said, look, if you have things that you want to express and things that you want to say, and you feel like you can't say that because you're in a nation where you don't feel safe expressing this and where people can get arrested for expressing things like this, why don't you give me your statement and let me express it? Because I live in a place where I can express it. And so let me get your message, and I will post it on our blog, I will read it on the show, and I will say what you can't say publicly.
When you say that Egypt used to be a more progressive place and they've gotten worse, I distinctly remember hearing the same thing about Afghanistan. Apparently, before the Taliban came in, I mean, women were teachers and doctors and lawyers and stuff, and then, it caught them completely off guard. This Taliban group swept in and imposed a whole bunch of, horrible, ridiculous laws.
I think that's an important point for people to understand, that some of these nations in the Middle East were right on board with Western ideologies prior to a lot of weird changes and that was why I was interested to talk to him and find out what happened. And so I have a statement here. I'm going to read it. I want to apologize because obviously, having not written it myself, I'm less familiar with it than I would be something that I'd written, even though I have read through it. I want to apologize for any sort of awkwardness in the language because I'm reading it unedited, and clearly I don't believe that English is his first language, although I think he does a good job of expressing himself in English. But, for any kind of awkwardness or, that, please, be forgiving. And this is what he had to say if he was allowed to say it. And he entitled it, Egypt from the Eyes of an Egyptian Atheist. This is me writing about Egypt from the first day of January 25th, 2011 revolution till the presidential elections. Me is an Egyptian ex-Muslim, currently an atheist, and has been so since I was 17. I am now 31 years old. Starting on the 25th of January 2011, there were calls for protests against the dictator regime led by Hosni Mubarak, that was basically run by businessmen who were friends of his sons Gamal and Allah Mubarak. Me, like thousands of Egyptians, took it to the streets in peaceful protest demanding basic human rights, freedom, social justice, and good living conditions for all Egyptians. That day was magical, with a number of people joining us in the streets who saw that change is possible after the success of the Tunisian Revolution. From that day till the 28th of January 2011, majority of the people in the streets were liberals, secularists, leftists, communists, and obviously Egyptians with no political affiliation. People, good people who demand and want change. During that time, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafis, or hardcore Muslims, were in their houses. The Muslim Brotherhood was waiting to see what will happen, and the Salafis were all waiting for a sheikh to issue a fatwa to join in. Some sheikhs said that joining these protests is against Islam. Some later joined in with their followers. We all inhaled tear gas that was expired, got shot at with all kinds of bullets, and I personally saw and helped some of the injured, some of which died between my hands. Beautiful, free boys and girls who left their homes from the back of their parents, like myself, for a cause that no human should even ask for, as freedom in all its forms should be a birthright. But what should we say about the world we live in that still are incapable of sharing together as humans? How can we call ourselves intelligent species with our hatred to one another and divisions that we created, whether it be religious, race, country, borders, gender, or skin color? On 27th January 2011, the internet and cell phone networks were cut off, taking us back to the 80s or before. I advise no dictatorship to do this, for it was the day with most people in the streets and blood, too. I will not go into details of people run over by police cars and random beatings, detaining, and disrespect performed by the police during those days and after it, too. The demands changed due to the slow response of the regime. Well, it was quite old, and now it was simple and unified all across Egypt. And this is in quotes. The people demand the removal of the regime, end quote. And after an 18-day sit-in in Tahrir Square, other squares in Egypt, and protests in front of all the lively places in the country, the regime fell apart on 11th February 2011 with blood and patience, not as much blood as being spilt in Syria right now. The regime has gone and celebrations started all around Egypt. Finally, we were free, or so I and many others thought. But wait, we still had the cunning Muslim Brotherhood dreaming of taking over the country, and the backward Salafis who want to implement Sharia in its worst forms, like in Saudi Arabia. And then parenthetically he has added, why is a country named after a family name, and how did this family get hold of a country? Are questions worth thinking about for the Salafis who may read this. A brief history of Egypt, so that for those who don't know should be in the picture, at least from my point of view. From the late 1800s all the way till 1960s, Egyptians used to go for education and work in Europe and the West in general, coming back with liberal progressive ideas about life and religion. In 1925, an Egyptian writer named Adham Ismail wrote a book titled Why I Am an Atheist, and the response was civil, as an Islamic scholar wrote a response to the book titled Why I Am a Muslim. I hope it would have remained so. There were some problems for secular intellectuals like Taha Hussein, who was accused of blasphemy, but there was never any serious threat to life, like in the case of Naguib Mahfouz, who was almost assassinated in 1994 on the hands of the Islamic extremists. Farag Fouda, who was killed after a debate about a secular state in Islam in 1992 with Omar Abdul Rahman, who issued a fatwa with his death. We will get back to Omar Abdul Rahman, who is currently in prison in the USA. Or Hamid Abu Zaid, who was divorced from his wife for being an apostate when some Islamists took him to court and won the case against him. In the 1970s, after Saudi Arabia started getting rich of oil, Egyptians started working there and came back with Wahhabi Salafi interpretations of Islam, taking us slowly to the back. They now have TV channels and a strong hold over a large number of followers who obey, and he put that in all caps, and he said, and yes, it has to be in capital letters. Now to the revolution once more. After the regime fell, the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, the SCAF, replaced the regime in what it was doing, and there was more blood, virginity tests for girls who took part in the revolution and arrested by them. We then had some protests in which all other than Islamists took part in. during which we were accused by the sheiks, most of them at least, of being secular atheists who do not want the country to succeed. We then reached the referendum for some amendments of the old constitution. That was a turning point, as the SCAF used the sheiks to pass this referendum, and in the majority of mosques, imams were saying that those who reject referendum will go to hell, as if there is evidence for its existence. We ended up with a messed up roadmap for the revolution. It was a failed attempt for the SCAF to stay in power. Later, the Islamists understood the game being played by the SCAF and turned against them, and it was late for all except the Islamists, as they have always, they obediently heard. It was during this time that it became clear that the hold the imams had over the minds of the people will take us to the Dark Ages, which is now, I am sure, inevitable. Now we are having a constitution being written with utter disrespect to freedom and based on Sharia. Some of the people writing the Constitution want to pass laws legalizing marriage of 9-year-old girls and not allowing foreign languages in schools. So much for working for freedom and liberty. The people running the country now are like Republicans without the secular Constitution to save the rest from stupidity, ignorance, and backwardness. Our current elected, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, stood in Tahrir Square after being elected a 4-year term and promised the people many good things, but also weird things, and put weird in quotes, like working on freeing a terrorist like Omar Abdul Rahman from prison in the USA. While for what happened to the revolution, all I can say is that the corrupt system that people died for is still alive, and it just grew a beard. A few days ago, an atheist ex-Christian running a Facebook page for Egyptian atheist was discovered, in quotes, he's got that again, in his neighborhood, and a mob gathered around his house, and when his mother called the police for protection, he was arrested for insulting the prophet on his page. Here's a link about him. He is Albert Sabir. As of today, his mother does not know where he is detained, and he provided a Facebook link for that. I do not hate religion, for I don't care about it, and I think it might be important for less fortunate people in life who have nothing to live for other than an afterlife. Although I know lots of very poor atheists and non-religious people who choose reason over superstition. But to have religion in politics is something that must never be allowed, for even if a God exists, nobody knows what he, she, or it wants. And that was the end of his statement. Mainly, I wanted to read that just because this is a statement that in his own country, he's afraid to read. This is something I wouldn't have cared if it was, just one line of nothing, simply because no one should be told that they can't express something like this. And to me, the important thing is just simply expressing it. It wouldn't have mattered, in my opinion, even if I disagreed with it. Mm-hmm. It's about the idea that he has a right to express this. He doesn't feel safe expressing it where he's at currently. I can express this, and I am expressing it. And I think that that's about, and until things change and until there's pressure to put to bear to change that policy, to get other nations, to get the world to understand that you have to allow opinions to be expressed. If you can express those opinions, express them, and if someone else can't and you think you can help get their message out and you want to do that, I would encourage you to do that.
Yeah. If I can make an observation about that, mm-hmm. it seems like the way he talks about the Muslim Brotherhood kind of drives the point home that when you have a strong devotion to a faith without evidence, like a particular brand of Islam, a group with some kind of political motivation, like for instance he mentions the weird things like telling everybody to help free Omar Abdul Rahman, right? And I'm sure a lot of people thought to themselves, who is that guy and why do I care if we free him? But these guys are good Muslims, they must they must know what they're doing. We see that kind of political manipulation happen a lot across all religions because being faithful to something and seriously believing that that's the only thing that can make you good makes you really gullible.
Yeah. It's just stunning to me that I can't imagine living in a place where I would be afraid to express a view like that.
Yeah.
Like really
anywhere
afraid.
else in Texas. No, but, well, I mean, we wouldn't be officially executed or anything.
Or even imprisoned.
Right.
I mean, that's... Yeah, so anyway, there's your statement.
Well, thanks for reading that.
Yeah.
First caller today is George from Jackson, Mississippi.
Hi.
Hello.
I have proof and evidence that Matt Dillon is a fat piece of shit who's going to hell.
Amazing.
Oh, and we thought he was going to talk about diamonds being produced by the Great Flood.
Right. So he's a different kind of idiot. Kyle in Montana?
Yeah, that's right.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. Well, first of all, I was expecting Matt today. I think that's what was listed on the website.
It was.
Well, we switched.
Yeah.
Oh, so what, did you just want to ask your question to Matt then? I mean, did you? I apologize that he couldn't make it and that we had a last-minute switch in host. But if you were hoping to target Matt with the question, then it might be better to either call it at a time when Matt hosts or maybe send an email.
Well, it just depends whether it applies to you two also. So I was just wondering whether either of you are vegetarians.
Nope. My sister is a vegan. I don't have strong feelings about it, but I'm not a vegetarian.
So how about, have either of you read Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape?
I personally have not, but I've read a lot about it.
Yes. Well, that was one of the things with Matt, is that he says that he agrees a lot with Sam Harris, but one of the fundamental things about that book is about well-being, not about what species or what race you are, but just about well-being. And I don't see how you draw the line where causing any sort of suffering suddenly becomes okay.
So do you have problems with example, like with the idea of carnivorous or other omnivorous species, or is it specifically human beings that you think have a problem with being omnivorous?
Well, I mean, that's one of the questions that I'm a little ambiguous about, because it might be true that it would be good of humans to kind of interfere in nature and stop the suffering itself. But I think certainly, I mean, you can't draw that division, because humans have the ability to judge suffering and to have moral opinions.
Oh, can I ask you a question then?
That's right.
If you saw a bear attempting to eat a hiker in a park, would you simply tell yourself that the bear doesn't know what it's doing and so it's okay for the bear to proceed? Or if you could stop it by killing the bear, would you kill the bear?
Well, that's probably a question, but yeah, I would kill the bear.
So then you do think that there's a problem with a bear eating a human being, even though the bear has no moral, personal moral inclination to not do so, or understanding that it shouldn't eat the person.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the other things, that I don't believe in the free will. So, I mean, I don't think that psychopaths who are out there murdering people are truly responsible for their actions.
But you do think we can protect ourselves as a society, right, and make sure that they don't have access to people to kill. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And
okay.
If a psychopath was attacking somebody, then I think it would be justified to stop that person, even though, and with lethal force, even though they're not exactly responsible for it.
Then why would you kill the bear?
Because the bear also isn't responsible for it, but it's causing suffering.
Okay, well, wait a minute now. Let me just ask you one more thing then. What if the bear were killing a young elk? Would you kill the bear to stop it?
That was what I wasn't sure about, that whether or not humans should interfere into nature.
But you would interfere if it was killing a hiker.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true.
Okay, so what's going on here?
Suppose it's that the bear is causing the suffering, and so maybe I actually haven't considered how that works out, but that might be an inconsistency within my worldview. But both of those would still be causing suffering.
Right.
So whether or not one of those is wrong, how are either of them okay?
Right, but now that you see that inconsistency, would you let the bear eat the person?
No.
Okay, would you let it eat the elk?
Well, for one thing, I don't know that I would interfere in either case if I was in any sort of great danger.
Well, no, I'm not asking you to put your life at risk here. I'm saying that, let's say you had a high-powered rifle, you were far enough away, and you're a fairly decent hunter. Mm-hmm. If you could take that shot and, fairly accurately kill the bear from the distance and based on what was going on, and you're not in any danger of being attacked by the bear and yourself being harmed.
Okay.
But, I mean, you would interfere if it was eating a person, but you wouldn't interfere if it was eating an elk. Do I understand that correctly?
You might. I haven't quite considered that.
Okay.
But even if you can draw that, that would be something that I would work on, and so from here on out, that would be true. But it would still be causing suffering.
But isn't it kind of, it's a little difficult to proceed with a discussion when I don't know where you lie on that question, because I don't know at this point whether you would come down on the side ultimately, if you thought further about this, of saying, I think I would let the bear eat the person, or if you would say, I would kill the bear if it was eating anything, like a person, an elk, whatever. I mean, if you're given more time to consider this, then you'll have to come up with a consistent perspective, or at least learn to understand why you're drawing a line. I think when you begin to understand why you're drawing a line, this issue will become more clear to you.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the line I was drawing was that humans have the actual capacity to realize that that's some sort of mistake. There literally are not, not a single one of them can possibly be swayed by her.
But I think maybe that sort of begs the question about, I mean, I'm not necessarily disagreeing that animals can suffer, but the question is, I mean, it's that assumption that is in question. I mean, like, do you have a moral objection to eating, for instance, shrimp, or just cuter animals?
No, I mean, anything that can suffer. I don't eat insects or anything like that either.
Well, I mean, how do you know how much an insect suffers?
Well,
I don't know how much they suffer, but I do know that they suffer.
I actually, though, would like to stick with the original point, because I don't feel like that's getting resolved. Because what you seem to be saying is that a human being has the capacity to understand the suffering that it's causing, right?
Yes, and to be swayed by the evidence to no longer cause that suffering.
Okay. Well, first, let's deal with the first part, which is human beings have compassion, empathy, a sense of equity that results in a morality, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other animals also possess this. This is just the first part of your statement. We will get to the second part. The first part of your statement has to do with the capacity to empathize, which an animal like a chimpanzee has the capacity to empathize, but it will brutally kill and eat a monkey.
Okay. So
well, this is just the first part, because you add more to it, and I understand that, and I'm not ignoring it.
No, I'm talking about the first part.
Right.
Is what you're saying, that the psychopath also can't feel empathy.
What I'm saying is that chimpanzee extends those social contract feelings to members of its society, but it restricts it and doesn't extend it to species outside. So it's extending its morality. It's a moral animal, but it extends it strictly within its species. And usually, I think, more so within its own group, although it will extend it to other. It does understand that other chimpanzees not in its own group are still chimpanzees and not, for example, monkeys. So you have this, we're not the only species that has a morality. And when you look at how animals apply that morality, when you're looking at other social species, they apply it within their species, not outside, because it's built to keep the social cohesion of that particular species intact so that they can work cooperatively to survive. There's a purpose for it. It's not arbitrary. You understand, correct?
Yes, I do, but
okay.
I don't think that's how I think about it.
Okay, that's fine. But you do understand. It doesn't matter if that's how you view it. Now, your second part of your statement had to do not with just feeling those empathetic feelings, but the idea that a human being has the capacity to kind of think about it in a way that might be higher level or more in depth or whatever you want to call it. But we might think more about what do these feelings mean and what is my obligation to another species, or whereas a chimpanzee may not be inclined to give it that sort of thought is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, so they literally are not it's not possible for them to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, I'm going to give that up as an assumption. Like, I'll say I would assume that with you. I'm not going to say you have to prove that to me. I'll say that, you know, it appears that way to me. And so I will accept that for now because it seems like a reasonable assertion here.
Okay, and I'm actually not saying that that is definitely true,
right,
because
but
I do know that a lot of things that
good.
we thought were once unique to humans.
Right. So here's the thing then, but then we have the question, then we get right back to the question of the bear. Because what we're saying is we would be excused from eating other species if we didn't think so much about it. And what I'm trying to get at with the bear is he excused? Can he eat the person? Or should he be stopped from eating the elk? And so it comes right back to that. When you say a person has a capacity to think on a deeper level, there's a flip side to that, which is animals that don't think about it on a deeper level are excused. And if that is correct, then why would we save a human being from being eaten by a bear? But generally, we would allow it to eat an elk. Shouldn't the bear be excused blanketly or not?
Okay. Well, then you have the question of, you know, humans don't need meat to survive.
Right. Many omnivores don't need meat to survive. Correct.
Okay. And I'm sure that we could figure out a way to make sure that even carnivores don't actually need meat to survive.
Okay.
I don't know that for sure, but I'm guessing that's the truth.
Okay.
So, for instance, you know, if I have a dog, you know, if I see him running after a squirrel or something, you know, I stop him.
Sure.
And I guess that would be an example of what you were saying. So I guess I do basically think of it in those terms. But the other thing is, you know, I don't really get emotional about it. So, you know, if I see a bear eating a human, eating a elk, I don't actually get that emotional about it. So I wouldn't have some sort of empathic, emotional response to it. This is really just more a rational thing. And so, you know, I think it definitely, you know, and I've considered the question of, you know, if we domesticate animals, is it okay for us, you know, to, you know, if we have a carnivorous fish, is it okay for us to give them feeder fish? And
right, now here's another interesting question, okay? So would you say that if an animal would be, let's say an animal was required to eat meat. I mean, I understand you're talking about meat substitutes, but you're saying basically if we could scientifically maybe engineer some sort of, like they have a pet food called Veggie Pet that you can feed your pets. But in, like, you know, you've got a pride of lions and they're hunting the savannas. Clearly, we're not going to go out and feed them Veggie Pet and, you know, stop them from killing every elk or, I mean, I'm sorry, they would eat gazelles, I suppose. But the idea of, what do you think of the idea that an animal like a carnivore requires meat to live? Do you think that that justifies eating and killing something to eat it?
Actually, I do. You know, if I'm a human and I'm out in the wild, you know, I'm attacked by something, or if I'm starving, you know, I'm literally cut off from any sort of survival. I think that the fact that I'm placed into a situation where my own survival is dependent on the survival of another being. Okay.
Can I ask you a question then?
Yes, but let me finish my point real quick.
Please do, yeah.
I do think that in that situation, I would probably be willing just to die for it. You know, I mean, I'm not going to say that for sure. You know, I don't think you can, you know, blame Jews who, when they're in the Nazi concentration camps, steal food from other Jews. You know, I mean, it's hard to put yourself in that situation where you're going to die.
Okay, all right. No, I think that's fair.
But logically, rationally, I do think that it would probably, be the correct thing just to die.
Okay.
But here's, I think this is an important point here, is would you feel comfortable telling somebody else that they have to die rather than do this thing that you think is wrong?
Yeah, I would rather, because of the way you feel about it personally, I would frame it like Russell would. That would be my next question as well, would be, all right, well, let's take you out of it. Let's say there is a guy and he's out for a walk with his dog. They go out into a cave and it caves in and he ends up stuck in there and no one knows he's there. After a couple weeks, he gets really desperate. He kills and eats the dog. And you wouldn't do that personally, but would you say you understand it and you think that it's excusable for him to do what he did?
No.
Okay. What if it was a squirrel that got into the cave with him?
still no.
Okay, so you think no person should ever kill and eat any other species if they are even going, if their life depends on it?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not absolutely sure that even I would be able to do that in this situation, but yes, that's why I give the example of, the Jews in the Nazi concentration camps. But if I'm thinking about it outside of the situation, then yes, I would hold him to that standard just as I would hold myself to it.
Okay, so just to be sure, there was an expedition.
The Donner Party?
No, not the Donner Party. There was an expedition that I'm trying to think of the name of the ship actually, and Perseverance, I think, was the name of the ship. They were looking for some route up north, and they got stranded in the ice at a bad time of year. They couldn't get out. They had themselves, and they had a team of sled dogs. And eventually they had to make a decision about how to survive, and they ended up eating the sled dogs. The guy who was in charge of the sled dogs was very unhappy about it, said that he would rather have killed some of the people that were on the crew with him that he felt were worth less than those dogs. However, they made the decision to eat the dogs, and you're saying that they were immoral.
Well, first of all, I think that's probably, you're getting into, feelings and, when we're thinking rationally about it. So,
well, yeah, regardless of the guy who liked the dogs, you're saying they were wrong.
Yes, and I would agree with him, probably in some of those situations, based on my emotions, that I would probably rather sacrifice, one human than, a dog. I probably feel a lot more empathy towards animals than a lot of people.
Okay.
But, either way, I would still say it was wrong.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think the bottom line is neither of us would say that. And while
I think that's a pretty extreme view you've got there.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. But while I think that this is a fair discussion to have, I don't really think that it's directly consequential of atheism.
It's not.
I think religious people can also fall on the side that you have, and atheists can also fall on the side that we have.
Okay.
And while it's interesting to hash out this morality stuff,
there is one other point I'd like to throw in. Do you think it's all right to kill other species for some reason other than food and not self-defense?
I can't exactly think of one.
Well, let's say, for example, I wanted to buy a car, and I know that my Goodyear radials on that car are made from vulcanized rubber that includes cow. Is it immoral for me to buy a car?
Well, I would say yes. You think about, you buy an iPhone that was manufactured over in China, by the child slaves. It's probably wrong to profit off of that suffering.
Okay, so then anybody that owns a car then is also being immoral, not just the person that has a stake.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I have a car right now.
Okay.
So,
well, but you think didn't you say you also are not a vegetarian?
No, I am.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were just saying you had some questions or concerns about the idea.
No, I've been maybe for 8 months.
Okay. All right.
One of the other things that it talks about in the moral landscape, and that wasn't exactly what convinced me of vegetarianism. I read that after I'd already become one.
Okay.
But it definitely solidified my belief about it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna let you go. I think Russell was kind of cluing me in that we've got to move on to some other calls. I'm sure the chat room is probably wanting to beat me in the head with a mallet at this point because we've gone on with like a topic. They're probably saying we want theist callers. So I don't even know if we
can I get in one 15-second bit?
Do it.
I'm timing you.
So one of the other things that it says in there is that it is just too hard to be completely moral. If somebody was being totally moral, it would just be completely impossible to function in the world. So, you have to draw those lines where you're not causing harm to everything else,
sure,
but you're also not living up, serving yourself to the absolute highest degree you can.
I agree. I think there's a disproportionate amount of energy spent on eating animals versus all the other methods we use to kill them and exploit them. So, for example, I don't see a big push for people to ban car use, even though the tires require, cows. I don't see people boycotting taking an airplane because those, anything with vulcanized rubber, why should anybody be using it if You know what I mean? You just don't see that drive to eliminate vulcanized rubber like you do for eating meat.
I will say that I personally would like to see stuff like factory farming reined in a bit.
Oh, yeah, horrible.
Yeah.
I agree, horrible.
You know, that's one of the things that really doesn't make sense to me, where
we're
people
gonna move on, though.
All right, that's fair.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling. I just wanted to end it on a point of agreement. So, see ya.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ray in Pensacola, Florida.
Yes.
You
Go.
are on the air.
This is Matt from Oslo.
I don't even think it's Matt from Oslo.
Matt from Oslo demonstrates once again that he is fucking nuts.
I don't even believe that was Matt from Oslo.
I do.
Really? I don't think so. I think it's just another troll.
Neil in Wales.
Hi there.
Hello.
Go.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, good. I'm following a bit of a change from your normal big three, big monotheistic religion. So what would spirits rather than singularity?
What?
I think he's looking for the opinion on the singularity movement. I'm not familiar with it, so I don't have.
Well, I mean, so you're calling about Ray Kurzweil, right?
I am, yes.
And Ray Kurzweil is like a futurist who thinks that he can reliably predict where we're going, basically.
Basically, yeah. And
I don't.
It's been hijacked by a lot of hijacking a lot of atheists into thinking that it's non-religious, but it really is.
Yeah, I am a non-profit, and I tend to fall on the side that anybody who I mean, you know, we can barely predict the weather. Anybody who thinks that they can predict the future course of human evolution reliably is almost certainly doesn't know what he's talking about. That's just my opinion.
I think his promise of kind of singularity is almost like a promise of heaven, and he's kind of selling supplements a little better life.
I'm having trouble hearing the caller.
Me
actually.
too. Can you repeat that slowly?
Sorry, his kind of theory of the singularity is almost like a theory of heaven.
Like a theory of what?
Of heaven.
Oh, heaven. Oh, okay.
Right, like...
Yeah, he's selling the kind of supplements and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just like saying you know the imaginary things that haven't happened yet, but they'll be good and we'll all be happy. Is kind of Ray Kurzweil's shtick.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. Yeah, and it kind of feeds into a larger fear of mine that people are losing traditional religion, are kind of picking up this now kind of new kind of pseudo religion.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So, anything else?
No, that was it, pretty much.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
Bye.
Whoops, did I just hit two buttons? Mike in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, how you doing?
Good.
You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you sound great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been wanting to call in for a while. About 3 weeks ago, my grandmother passed away, sadly, and we went to her funeral in Tennessee about a few weeks ago, and after the service was over, all my relatives were standing around meeting each other and all that, and then all of a sudden, my mom's cousin's wife walks up to me, and she's very religious, and I'm not religious, by the way. She walks up to me out of the blue, and she just starts preaching to me all of a sudden just about, she knew that I'm an atheist. And so she started talking to me about, I can't remember what Bible verses she used to be exact, because the whole time I'm just like struggling not to roll my eyes at her or anything like that, because she was just kind of rambling on and on. She talked about, well, I think if I remember clearly, she said something about that the Holy Spirit, there's proof of it, and why everybody started speaking different languages and all that. And then she went on to say that, well, there have been proof of the Holy Spirit because there have been drunks and drug addicts that recovered from it. Just all this crap that I've heard before that I don't buy.
Right.
And I'm sorry?
No, I'm just saying, right? I understand. We get letters like this.
Yeah. But I kind of wanted to discuss it with her, like, you know, but the thing is, I'm at a funeral, and I just buried my grandmother, and I think these kind of discussions are the last thing on my mind.
Yeah.
You know,
the last thing on my mind.
You were dealing with a very asymmetrical situation there, because your distant relative is coming up to you. I didn't realize she was intentionally being a jerk until you said she knows I'm an atheist.
Right. And
she chose that moment to get in your face. So here's a person being extremely rude to you, and you're wondering how to be polite to her in return.
Yeah.
I feel like you have two choices in that situation. You can say, excuse me, or, well, I mean, you can sit and listen, which you did,
right.
I guess. Yeah. Or you can, so two other choices. You can just say, excuse me, I'm not interested in this, and very pointedly go talk to somebody else.
That's what I should have done.
Well, yeah.
Or, you know, get into it and draw a crowd, which maybe is not the best.
I didn't want to do that either.
Right, right.
Right.
I would like to say one thing here, Mike, because we get things like this quite a lot. And I just want to say that in our society, we spend a lot of time teaching children how to be polite. Like we sit there and we tell them, this is how, if the kid does something impolite, we stop them immediately and we're just like, oh, that's rude. You don't stare at someone like that, or don't say something like that. You don't comment on someone's, clothing. You don't, say anything bad if it's. And so we're constantly trying to teach children how to politely interact and to be socially, kind to other people. But what we do a really bad job of, and where we really fall down, is we don't ever teach people quite how to handle with rude interactions.
Right.
We always make this assumption that people will be polite and you be polite and everyone's polite. So when someone is rude and they break social protocols and do something that is unexpected, they put everybody around them in an uncomfortable social situation, and they are rudely and thoughtlessly and callously thinking only of themselves, their own comfort, their own desire to do whatever it is that they're doing or saying, and not giving any regard to the rest of these people. And at that point, I really feel like our responsibility to be kind sort of goes down a bit, because this person is not really understanding the level of discomfort and awkwardness they are causing in that situation. And I'm not saying that we need to be like completely out of line, but like Russell is saying, you want to be firm in that. You don't want to be ambiguous. And what you're describing is, yeah, maybe I should have done that. Yeah, it sounds reasonable now, but at the time you're sitting there thinking, I don't want to be an ass.
And that must have been, that would be totally uncomfortable to be in that situation.
And so what you do is, exactly what Russell said, what I would say is something like, do you realize how inappropriate you're being right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like her answer.
Yeah.
And another thing is, before I forget, is I went and told my mom a little bit later on, because she's a believer, and I told my mom, I was like, yeah, such and such has started preaching me out of the blue, and she got a little annoyed because she was like, well, I told her not to walk up and talk to you. And the thing is, because what my mom told her was, well, he's an atheist. He doesn't believe in the afterlife. He realizes he's never going to get to see his grandmother ever again, and that's why he took it so hard. So the fact that she went against my mother's wishes is
even worse.
Kind of pissed me off.
Yeah, it's
really.
Even worse. Yeah, it's just completely inexcusable all the way around.
I know.
And a lot of times it's, the thing to do is just to simply confront the person with what they're doing, like the inappropriate comment, or to simply say, do you really think this is an appropriate time to be talking about this or addressing this with me? I don't know who you are.
I mean, I would think actually some combination of, first of all, saying to this person, excuse me, you're violating my boundaries and I don't want to talk to you about this right now.
Yeah.
And then if you don't want to get into an argument in the future, I think the thing to do is avoid that person and let people know that you don't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah, and feel free to say, don't ever talk to me about this again.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that's how you feel, or, if you want to talk to them, some people like to engage in that, then we can talk about this at a more appropriate time. But if you don't want anything to do with it, it's completely fair to say that. You don't have to swear at her, but,
I know.
But yeah, be firm.
Yeah, like maybe next time that person calls and maybe it comes up, then I can talk to her about it. But other than that, just maybe not worry about it until the time being.
And be sure that you're clear on your boundary, because a lot of times people push back and they'll start explaining to you, well, I only care about your immortal soul. It doesn't matter. I'm not arguing with you about this. I'm telling you that it's inappropriate and that I do not wish to discuss this with you, and we are not having this conversation.
One more thing. Remind me what relation she was to you?
Mother's cousin's wife.
Mother's cousin's wife. You told your mother, which, I mean, I don't know how close to your cousin you are, but you
not really close at all.
Okay, well then there's probably no problem, because you don't have to be in touch with these people very
you're
much.
good.
Yeah, I know. All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Sure.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
it was
thank
nice
you.
talking to you.
All right, thanks for calling.
No problem.
Julie in Arkansas.
Hi, how are you guys?
Fine, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I was listening to the letter that you read at the beginning of the show from the person in Egypt, and you had mentioned that you were glad that we live in a country where, you know, we're not arrested for our beliefs, which is true. But I don't know how many other people have come across this, but when I'm at work or whatever, like my previous boss was very religious, and it was quite clear that I really couldn't share any of my, like, I guess, anti-religious beliefs. And to the point where I had a feeling that if I did, there would be negative consequences as far as my work goes. So my question is, are we really free to talk about our religious beliefs?
Okay. Well, first of all, freedom of speech involves government censorship.
Right.
So I understand that. And I don't know if you caught the entire segment on that letter, but one of the things I did say was that some of the atheists on that Egyptian atheist page have their names and faces up. And one of the things I pointed out was it probably is a lot like here, where it depends sort of where you're at regionally. So I do understand that the situation for atheists is not the same everywhere you go, even here in the U.S. And we get plenty of letters like what you're describing from people telling us, I don't dare come out. One of the things we deal with on the program a lot is people either emailing or calling and saying, I'm not out, should I be? And our response is always, well, not always, I shouldn't say our response is always, but frequently. And for me, the response is always, think about the worst thing that you think could happen if you come out with your atheism, the worst thing that realistically could happen to you, and then ask yourself if you are prepared to deal with that. And if you're not, then don't be out. And the good thing about being out or not being out is that you can wait. So there's usually not pressure. The pressure to be out is generally self-imposed. It usually is the person saying, it's just eating me up inside to be dishonest to people, and it's hard for me to keep this in, especially when it's a person living with like an underage, well, not even underage, but a young person living at home. Right. They have a hard time because they're being dragged to church. They're being made to actually engage in this stuff, to do prayers at dinner or whatever, and they don't believe it, and they're afraid to tell their families, and they are afraid that they'll get kicked out of their house. They're afraid that mom and dad won't pay for college. They've got this slew of real-world consequences that can occur if they come out that would be a real penalty to them. And I'm in a fortunate situation where I can be out and nobody really cares. But I get that other people are not like that, and I certainly don't. When someone tells me I'm not out, I don't think you should be. I think it depends on your situation.
Right. I also want to mention I don't maybe have a complete picture of what your situation is like at work, but there's a good argument to be made that you should just leave religion and politics at home when you're in the workplace. I mean, if turning the tables, I don't know how aggressive your boss is with his Christian beliefs, but if he was, ranting at you, sending mails about how you need to be saved by Jesus Christ to you, that would be inappropriate for the workplace. It would also, in the reverse situation, for an employee, be inappropriate for an employee to be sending that to his boss, and by extension, flip it around. As an atheist, you don't necessarily be out there pushing your religious or political opinions on the other people at work because, you're there to do a job. I happen to be lucky. I happen to be at a job where I have some fairly progressive coworkers who we talk about this stuff at lunch. But if I had some very religious or very right-wing people, I would probably shut up.
Yeah, and in my situation, it just doesn't come up. At our workplace, it's just work and that's it. Every now and then somebody might share a photo of their kid or something, but I mean, there's no discussion about beliefs.
So it doesn't mean you don't have freedom of speech, but you know, I'd be interested to know how your boss, I mean, you said you know that your boss is very religious. My next question is, how do you know that?
Well, I mean, it was evident from when I interviewed. You know, one of the first things that, because I'm in space science, and during my interview, he pointed at a book that was pictures of novas and things like that, and he said, I don't see how you can look at that and not see the face of God. And I was like, and I'm in my head, I'm thinking, well, I see balls of gas that exploded.
Yeah,
you know,
that's inappropriate, and
yeah,
you know, in some places have laws against proselytizing in the workplace, or at least human resources departments that frown on that. But it depends on what kind of company you're in, and I'm not going to say it's easy to be in a private company where they just don't care, and you could lose your job if you make an issue of it.
Well, this is academia.
Well, then I bet you could complain to somebody and get results.
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
I pretty much tried to just let it go and just move on and you know, not push the situation, especially since I was a new employee. So it was one of those, keep your head down and don't say anything and just, you know, go on like nothing was wrong. But I mean, you know, but I often wondered like what my steps were if something happened, if it was something I can push, if it got to the point where it was really inappropriate. So.
Right.
But I mean, I guess it varies from place to place.
I think you should make some discreet inquiries with human resources. That's what I would do in your situation.
Okay.
Well, I think we're going to let you go.
Okay.
We're almost out of time.
Well, thanks for taking my call.
Thank
you for calling.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, so I've been informed by the studio that there's a problem with the character generator, which I'm not sure if that just means we can't see any credits or there aren't going to be any credits. But we have some excellent people in the studio, you know, in the back room who are making this show happen. You know, and they are so great every week, and I wish you could see all their names, but if I name some of them, then I'll just leave some out. Let's see, we'll be going to Thread Guilds after this, and in the minute I have remaining, I just wanted to mention, since Tracie plugged some things on the blog, I had a 5-round debate with a presuppositional apologist named Stephen Feinstein, and it's over. So you're allowed to comment now if you want. And so if you've been following that at all on the Atheist Experience blog, freethoughtblogs.com/AXP, I welcome your comments.
Yeah, and if you haven't been following it, you should. It's very interesting.
It was very interesting, but exhausting to get through. So, thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Tracie.